The bright sun shines on the marching legion. Every movement is measured, every step is loud and confident. The gleam of polished armor is blinding, and each warrior carries a weapon honed to deadly sharpness. This is not a grand march through the streets of Rome, but a movement to a new battle, to a new victory. Behind every soldier is the power and grandeur of the Roman Empire. But behind that power lies something much harsher and more ruthless. The reality of war, where survival depends not only on bravery, but also on the lethality of the tools in your hands. We used to think of Roman legionnaires as fearless, armored heroes fighting for the glory of Rome. We see them in movies and pictures, holding the famous gladius and scutum in their hands. What if I suggest that you look deeper into the very core of their arsenal, to see the tools that turned ordinary people into ruthless killing machines? A weapon that wasn't just metal and wood, but an extension of their will, bringing death and destruction. The Roman army was the pinnacle of military engineering and tactics, and their success largely depended on the effectiveness of their weaponry. But what were the most brutal weapons that turned the enemies of Rome to dust and dust, leaving only a trail of blood in their wake? Are you ready to learn about those tools that knew no mercy and understand why they were so deadly in the hands of Roman soldiers? Then stay tuned, because today we will reveal 10 of the most brutal weapons used by Roman legionnaires. Please note that this will be a journey not just into the past, but into the very heart of the Roman war machine. When it comes to Roman weapons, the gladius immediately comes to mind. Gladius. This short, double-edged sword, about 60-70 centimeters long, was not just a piece of metal, but the embodiment of Roman military doctrine. It was designed for close combat, where legionnaires standing in tight lines could use it as effectively as possible for stabbing attacks. In a tight formation, long swords would be inconvenient, and the gladius allowed precise and deadly thrusts to penetrate the enemy's armor and flesh. Its effectiveness lay in its simplicity and lethality. Short, fast, powerful. It was ideal for piercing, not chopping, which made it incredibly dangerous in a crowd of fighters. The production of the gladius was carefully worked out. The blade, usually made of high-quality steel, was forged with extreme care to ensure maximum strength and sharpness. Roman blacksmiths used cutting-edge techniques for their time, such as tempering and tempering, to give the blade the necessary hardness and flexibility, preventing it from breaking in battle. The handle, often made of wood or bone, was ergonomic, providing a firm grip even in the heat of battle, and sometimes reinforced with metal inserts for extra strength and balance. Scabbards, usually made of wood, covered with leather and decorated with metal, served not only to protect the blade, but also to demonstrate the status of the owner, since they could be richly inlaid. Each gladius was not just a weapon, but part of the legionnaire's identity. It was an extension of his hand, of his will, of his willingness to kill for Rome. Historians believe that the gladius was developed under the influence of Celtic and Iberian swords, but the Romans improved it, making it shorter and adapted to their unique tactics. This sword became the symbol of the legion, the symbol of the Roman military machine. Its compactness allowed it to be worn on a belt without interfering with movement, and quickly snatched out at any time. Combined with a heavy shield scutum that served as both a shield and a battering ram, the gladius formed a deadly combination that allowed the Romans to dominate hand-to-hand combat. With each stroke of the gladius, the blood of the enemy was shed, and with each severed limb, the borders of the Roman Empire expanded. He was not just a sword, but an instrument of conquest that conquered the world. Its legendary effectiveness was one of the reasons that the Roman Empire was able to build its power on the bodies of defeated enemies. There were various modifications of the gladius. Gladius hispaniensis, the earliest and most massive version with a curved blade extending toward the center, which gave it both piercing and chopping properties. Later, more standardized and lightweight forms appeared, such as Gladius Mainz, the Gladius Mainz, with a straighter blade and longer point, and the Gladius Pompeii, the most common and compact version, named after the Pompeii finds. These changes reflected the evolution of tactics and preferences of the Roman army. But the overall concept remained the same, a short, deadly sword for a dense swarm. But what else was there in the legionnaire's arsenal, besides his trusty gladius, to break the will of the enemy before the melee began? If the gladius was the heart of Roman hand-to-hand combat, the pilum was its crushing fist striking from afar. This throwing spear, heavy and carefully balanced, was designed not only to defeat the enemy, but also to disable them even before the melee began. The length of the pilum could reach 2 meters, but its peculiarity was not in the length, but in the design. Its long, thin iron rod was made of soft iron and connected to the wooden part with a metal pin or rivets. When the pilum hit the target, the soft iron rod bent, making it impossible for the enemy to use it again. This unique feature of the pilum was not accidental, but an elaborate tactical ruse. If the pilum pierced the opponent's shield, the curved rod would get stuck in it, rendering the shield useless and cumbersome. The enemy was forced to either drop their shield, losing vital protection, or carry it with a curved pilum sticking out of it, which made maneuvering extremely difficult and disrupted the formation. Imagine, legionnaires drop thousands of pilums before attacking, turning the enemy ranks into chaos and confusion. The warriors try to pull out the stuck spears, lose their formation, and panic. At that moment, the Roman legions were already closing in, ready to unleash a hail of gladius strikes, taking advantage of the enemy's confusion. The pilum was a weapon that not only killed, but also demoralized, broke the will of the enemy. He was a messenger of doom, a harbinger of impending defeat. Each thrown spear held the promise of carnage to come, setting the stage for gladius, triumph. Legionnaires were trained to throw pilums with great precision and strength, often using 2 pilums per soldier. One light for a long throw, and one heavy for a short throw. The effectiveness of pilum has been proven on countless battlefields, from Gaul to Britain, from Dacia to the Middle East. His ingenuity and practicality highlight his Roman genius for developing deadly weapons that can change the course of a battle with a single massive roll. Thus, in the Battle of Actium, 31 BC, Octavian's Marines used pilums to defeat the crews of the ships of Antony and Cleopatra, which played a decisive role in the outcome of the battle. The pilum was so effective that its design remained almost unchanged for centuries, remaining a faithful companion of the Roman legionary until the decline of the Western Roman Empire. But what allowed the Roman soldiers to remain virtually impregnable in battle and at the same time deliver their own crushing blows? At the mention of Roman legionnaires, in addition to the sword and spear, the image of a rectangular, curved shield, scutum, immediately appears in the men's scutuma. However, it wasn't just a piece of wood for defense, but an integral part of the combat system, which was a formidable weapon in itself. The scutum, made of several layers of wood glued together, covered in leather and reinforced with metal edges, weighed about 7 to 10 kilograms. In the center of the shield was a metal ambona, bulge designed to deflect blows and, importantly, to deliver their own crushing attacks. Scutum was used not only to block the blows of swords and spears, but also for active offensive actions. In a tight formation, such as the famous testudo turtle, the legionnaires' shields formed an impenetrable wall, protecting the soldiers from arrows and projectiles from above and from the flanks, which was especially effective during sieges or when advancing through open terrain. But in hand-to-hand combat, in a tight melee, the Romans used the scutum to deliver powerful blows, knocking the enemy down, breaking bones, and throwing him off balance. A metal umbon placed at the level of the face or chest could cause serious injury, and the sharp edges of the shield could cut through the skin and muscles. It was a melee weapon that allowed the legionnaire to dominate the battlefield, creating space for the gladius to strike. Training with scutum was an integral part of every legionnaire's training. They were taught not only to hold a formation and defend themselves, but also to attack using the shield as a battering ram, as an extension of their arm, turning it into a deadly tool. This tactic allowed the Romans to break through enemy lines, creating gaps where legionaries with gladiuses could rush. Scutum was a symbol of the unity and discipline of the Roman army. He was their fortress and their battering ram, their defense and their weapon. It allowed them to act as a single unit, creating an impenetrable wall of steel and wood that could withstand any onslaught. It is important to note that the shape of the scutum has changed over time, from the more oval shapes of the early Republic to the characteristic rectangular shields of the imperial period. This evolution reflected a constant drive to improve and optimize for warfare. But how did the Romans fight when the enemy was fortified behind walls, or a mass destruction of manpower was required at a distance beyond the capabilities of ordinary soldiers and their gladiuses? When the Romans needed to crush powerful fortifications or destroy a large concentration of enemy forces from a distance, they turned to their engineering geniuses who created deadly machines. One of the most impressive and brutal was the ballista, a formidable throwing weapon that resembled a giant crossbow. The ballistae were capable of launching huge bolts or rocks over considerable distances with incredible force. Their design, based on the principle of twisting ropes made of animal tendons, allows them to accumulate a huge amount of energy released when fired, providing an amazing kinetic energy of the projectile. The bolts launched by the ballista were powerful enough to pierce through thick wooden walls, armor, and even the bodies of several people. Some of the bolts were tipped with spikes or notches, making it almost impossible to remove them from the body without causing additional suffering, aggravating wounds and increasing the risk of infection. Stone projectiles weighing up to several dozen kilograms could bring down entire sections of walls, destroy towers, and sow panic in the enemy's ranks, turning their defensive positions into a pile of rubble and dust. The ballista was a siege weapon, but it was also used on the battlefield to destroy dense enemy formations, thinning their ranks even before the legionaries engaged in hand-to-hand combat, which significantly reduced the Romans' orwish enornihuman anaherapia uteri. It was a harbinger of disaster, a symbol of the inevitable destruction that the Romans were carrying out, suppressing the will to resist even before the assault began. The construction and maintenance of a ballista required not only engineering knowledge, but also qualified personnel, which consisted of specially trained engineers and gunners who were able to accurately calculate the trajectory and fire a shot. These machines were the birthplace of Roman military engineering and a testament to their desire to excel on the battlefield at all costs, using not only muscular strength, but also intelligence. Ballistae could be of various sizes, from small ones that were transported to the battlefield and used to target specific targets, for example, enemy officers or individual detachments, to massive siege weapons that were assembled on the spot from pre-made parts. They allowed the Romans to wage war on their own terms, dictating the rules of battle and destroying any obstacles, whether they were impregnable city walls or dense ranks of enemy infantry. The ballista was a merciless death machine that left only ruins and corpses in its wake, reminding everyone of Rome's invincibility and the terror that followed her army. Its effectiveness was so great that even the toughest defenders trembled when they heard the menacing clank of its mechanism. But what did the Romans do when they needed even greater crushing power, capable of breaking through even the most impregnable fortresses where ballistae might be powerless against thick stone walls? To crush the most powerful city gates and walls, the Romans used a siege ram, or Ares. This massive weapon, often reinforced with a metal tip shaped like a ram's head, hence the name Ares, ram, was one of the most destructive tools in the Roman arsenal of siege technology. The battering ram consisted of a huge wooden log, often reinforced with iron along its entire length, and not just at the tip, which gave it incredible strength. This log was swung manually by dozens or even hundreds of soldiers, or with the help of a special frame with a suspension system, which made it possible to deliver powerful, repeated blows to enemy fortifications. His goal was simple and terrible: to create a gap in the defense so that the legionnaires could rush in and complete the rout. The battering ram was not only physically destructive, but also psychologically crushing. The monotonous, deafening blows on the goal or wall that shook the ground and made the defenders feel helpless instilled fear and panic. With each slam of a log against the walls, the defenders could hear their fate approaching, and every crack of wood or crumbling stone was a harbinger of the end. They knew that sooner or later their defenses would fall, and then they would face an inevitable massacre, because the mercy of the Romans to the defeated enemy was rare, and the assault was usually accompanied by a complete sacking of the city. It was the hammer of the gods of war, relentlessly beating the clock until the city fell, until chaos and destruction descended upon the besieged, turning their homes to rubble and their lives to ash. Using a battering ram was extremely dangerous for his calculation. The soldiers who set it in motion were exposed to a hail of arrows, rocks, boiling water, and burning tar, which were hurled from the walls, causing terrible injuries. To protect the operators, the battering ram was often placed under a special canopy known as a turtle or vine, which could be reinforced with additional layers of wood, hides, or wet skins to protect it from fire. Or it was installed in a mobile siege tower, which provided some protection from enemy projectiles and allowed the ram to be brought close to the wall. Despite all the risks, the battering ram was an indispensable tool for the Romans. He allowed them to overcome the most stubborn defenses and open the way to victory, demonstrating their enthusiasm and ruthlessness, stopping at nothing. It was a symbol of Roman determination and their ability to crush any resistance, even if it required enormous effort in the lives of many soldiers who sacrificed themselves for the greatness of Rome. But what did the Romans use when they needed not only power, but also accuracy in throwing heavy projectiles that could hit a target behind walls or at a considerable distance, using mounted fire? When it came to throwing large stones over long distances with a high trajectory, the Romans used onagera catapult that got its name from the wild donkey because of its kicking mechanism, resembling a hoof strike, which was accompanied by a strong shaking of the entire structure. Unlike the ballista, which hurled projectiles in a straight line, the onager was designed for mounted fire, which made it ideal for throwing rocks over walls or for hitting enemy clusters behind cover where a direct shot couldn't reach. The power of the onager was such that it could launch rocks weighing up to 50-60 kilograms over hundreds of meters, turning them into deadly raindrops raining down from the sky, bringing destruction and terror. The onager mechanism was relatively simple, but surprisingly effective. A massive wooden frame, a torsion beam made of animal sinews, often from oxen or horses, to which a long lever with a sling at the end was attached. When the lever was lowered with asswing, the tendons twisted, accumulating a huge amount of potential energy. When released, the lever forcefully threw out a stone that flew in a high arc. Each onager shot was accompanied by a deafening roar, the clang of machinery and the shaking of the earth, creating a sense of imminent doom. Its projectiles could penetrate the roofs of buildings, destroy enemy siege towers, and destroy enemy manpower, causing massive damage and causing massive losses, even if the enemy was behind seemingly secure shelters. Often, onagers were used to throw incendiary projectiles pots of burning pitch or Greek fire, which further increased their destructive effect, setting fire to wooden structures and causing panic. Onagers were indispensable in sieges of cities, where they could constantly bombard fortifications, destroying them and demoralizing the defenders, not giving them rest day or night. Their incessant bombardment drained the defenders' strength and undermined their morale, forcing them to surrender. They were also used on the battlefield to suppress enemy formations and destroy enemy siege engines, creating chaos and panic in their ranks, forcing them to retreat or flee the battlefield. Onager was the epitome of brute force and destructiveness. He was a sling that hurled death from the heavens, leaving only chaos and destruction in its wake, a testament to the ruthless efficiency of the Roman military machine, which knew no mercy. Depending on their size, they could be operated by a team of several people who carefully measured the number of tendons and tension to achieve maximum accuracy and range. But what did the Romans do when they needed a more versatile tool, suitable for both construction and combat, which was always at hand for every legionary, even if it was not on the front line, but on engineering work and at the same time could boast as a weapon? Not every weapon in the Roman arsenal was designed for direct combat. Some of the tools were equally deadly, although they were mainly used for engineering work. One of these is the dolus, a heavy, sturdy sapper's shovel or pickaxe that every legionnaire carried. Although it was not a weapon in the traditional sense, its role in the Roman war machine was colossal. Dolus was used to build roads, camps, and siege structures, but in the hands of an experienced legionary, it could also be a deadly weapon. Legionnaires were not only warriors, but also engineers. They built fortresses, paved roads, dug trenches and siege trenches, built bridges and temporary fortifications. Dolus was their main tool for these tasks. Its robust construction, often with a metal tip, made it possible to work effectively with earth, stone, and wood. The legionnaires were trained to dig, build, and dismantle with incredible speed, which gave them a huge tactical advantage. The ability to quickly build a fortified camp at the end of the march, or to build a road through difficult terrain, was critical to the success of the campaign. Dolus was a symbol of this engineering power. Its versatility allowed legionnaires to be self-sufficient in the field, not depending on a bulky wagon train with specialized tools. Each soldier was effectively a mobile engineer, able to quickly adapt to changing battlefield conditions and terrain. The dolus, together with the pickaxe, delabra, was an integral part of the equipment, confirming that the Roman legionary was much more than just an infantryman. It was the foundation of the Roman army's logistics and tactical flexibility, allowing it to quickly build defenses and strengthen positions even in enemy territory. But in the event of an unexpected attack or in close combat, when the main weapon was lost or unavailable, the dolus turned into an improvised but formidable combat unit. The sharp edge of a shovel could cut through flesh, and the heavy tip of a pickaxe could crack a skull or break bones, especially effective against lightly armored opponents such as barbarians. In the hands of an experienced fighter, dolus could inflict terrible injuries, especially in a chaotic, fierce battle where every move mattered. Its long handle gave an advantage in reaching the opponent, and its weight provided the power of the blow. Soldiers caught off guard could fight back with the dolus, using it as a heavy mace or axe, demonstrating their resourcefulness. It was a symbol of Roman versatility and practicality, a tool that served equally well for construction and destruction. The dolus was a hidden weapon that was always at hand, ready to be used in any situation, demonstrating that the Romans were able to extract maxims from every item in their arsenal, turning even mundane tools into deadly weapons. But what else did the Romans use to wreak havoc and panic in the enemy's ranks without making direct contact, using guile and surprise to undermine their morale? The Romans were masters not only in creating weapons for killing, but also for capturing and destroying. Their arsenal included specialized tools such as chains and hooks, which were used in both naval battles and city sieges. These seemingly simple devices were surprisingly effective and brutal in their application, demonstrating the ingenuity of the Romans in achieving their goals by any means, even if it required indirect influence on the enemy. In naval battles, the Romans used grappling hooks and chains to pull enemy ships towards them, making them unable to maneuver and apply their traditional naval tactics based on ramming and maneuvering. This allowed them to turn a sea battle into a land battle, where their superiority in close combat with the help of gladiuses was undeniable. The famous corvussae boarding bridge with a spike that bit into the deck of an enemy ship was a prime example of this tactic, which allowed legionaries to quickly cross over to the enemy side, turning the deck into a battlefield. Chains were used to bind to enemy ships, creating chaos and allowing legionnaires to easily board, turning the enemy fleet into a jumble of ships that became easy prey. These hooks were sharpened and could cause wounds if used as improvised weapons in hand-to-hand combat, especially when the enemy tried to fend off a boarding party. They were a tool for capture, not outright killing, but their effectiveness in destroying the enemy's formation and turning naval combat into carnage was deadly, ensuring Rome's dominance at sea. This tactic allowed Rome, originally a non-maritime power, to gain the upper hand over experienced navies such as the Carthaginian one, demonstrating that Roman pragmatism and engineering could overcome even the lack of traditional naval experience. Chains and hooks were also used in sieges of cities, proving their versatility and destructive power. Hooks, often massive and heavy, were used to bring down defensive structures, such as walls, towers, or palisades. Massive hooks attached to cables could be thrown over battlements or attached to gates, and then winches or hundreds of people pulling on cables would pull out sections of the defenses, literally tearing them away from the main structure. This created gaps through which the Roman troops could easily break in, causing panic among the defenders and undermining their morale. Chains were also used to destroy enemy machinery, such as siege towers or catapults, by binding their moving parts or knocking them over. They were weapons of capture and destruction that slowly but surely broke the enemy's will and opened the way to victory. These seemingly simple devices were incredibly effective in the hands of Roman engineers and soldiers, demonstrating their ingenuity in methods of warfare, where every means was justified by the end, and destruction was only a prelude to conquest. The Romans left no stone unturned when it came to achieving victory. But what did the Romans do when they needed a hidden, sneaky threat that could disable entire enemy units without even coming into direct contact with them, using the element of surprise and pain? Not all of Rome's weapons were bulky and obvious. Some of them were small, inconspicuous, but incredibly effective at creating chaos and causing injury. One of these hidden killers was the caltrip, or tribulae, small metal spikes with 4 sharp ends arranged so that one of them always stuck up, no matter how they fell. They were thrown into the enemy's path to slow down their advance, damage the legs of men and horses, and sow panic. Caltrips were ideal for creating defensive zones, slowing down cavalry, and disorganizing infantry. They could be scattered unnoticed on the ground, especially in places where the enemy was forced to concentrate, such as in narrow passages, at the gates of a fortress, or on escape routes. Imagine an enemy army full of determination is advancing on the Roman positions, and suddenly its ranks begin to fall randomly. Screams of pain and horror are heard. Soldiers limp and try to pull spikes out of their boots or out of their feet. Horses rear up and break their legs, and their riders end up on the ground, becoming easy targets for Roman archers and spearmen. Caltrips didn't kill directly, but they made the enemy vulnerable, disrupted their formation and morale, creating ideal conditions for a counterattack by Roman legions that could easily finish off a disorganized and wounded enemy. These insidious spikes were often thrown in front of Roman positions, in narrow passages, near city gates, or in places where the enemy was supposed to retreat. They were easy to make, easy to carry in bags, and incredibly efficient at minimal cost, making them the perfect weapon of mass destruction. Their use was particularly cruel, as caltrip wounds were dirty and easily infected, which in the conditions of ancient medicine often led to a long and painful death from sepsis or gangrene. Even if the wound was not fatal, it would put the soldier out of action for a long time, requiring care and resources, which put a heavy burden on the enemy army. The use of caltrips was particularly effective in defense, when the Romans could prepare the battlefield in advance by placing them in the grass or under a layer of leaves, making them completely invisible until the moment of collision. Caltrips were a symbol of Roman cunning and their ability to use even the simplest means to achieve their goals, not disdaining even the most vile methods of war, because in Roman military doctrine, the goal was complete superiority and destruction of the enemy's will. They were an invisible threat that lurked underfoot, turning every step into a deadly risk, and emphasized the ruthlessness of Roman military strategy, which sought complete dominance. But what did the Romans use when they had to deal with mass riots, neutralize the rebels, or simply restore order in the most brutal way, using not a weapon for war, but a tool of suppression that could break the spirit and body? Although the flagrum, or flagellum, was not a military weapon in the usual sense, its role in maintaining discipline and control over slaves, criminals, and even soldiers made it one of the most brutal tools in Roman society. It was a whip with several straps, often with metal or bone balls, hooks or sharp spikes woven into them. These inclusions were designed to tear flesh with each blow, turning the victim's back into a bloody mess, leaving deep, painful wounds. The flagrum was intended to inflict excruciating, unbearable pain, and its use was widespread as a form of punishment, torture, and even public execution. The Romans, known for their pragmatism, used this whip not only to suppress the will, but also as a means of educating recalcitrant legionaries when other methods were powerless. Even the centurions who had the authority to punish soldiers could use similar devices to maintain the immaculate discipline that was the cornerstone of Roman military power. In the hands of a slave driver, a mine supervisor, or a military tribune, the flagrum became an instrument of absolute power and intimidation. Each blow left deep lacerations on the body, which could easily become infected and lead to gangrene, sepsis, and ultimately a slow and painful death if there was no proper medical care, which was often not available. The flagrum's goal was not to kill immediately, but to cause maximum suffering, break the will, force submission at all costs, suppress any resistance, and demonstrate who was in charge. Its use was part of the Roman system of policing, based on fear and violence, where physical punishment was the norm and justice was often synonymous with cruelty. This instrument was one of the many ways in which Rome ensured the stability of its vast empire by controlling both conquered peoples and its own citizens. The flagrum was not only a tool for punishment, but also a symbol of cruelty and inhumanity on which a part of Roman society and its social hierarchy were built. Its use was often public to intimidate others and prevent disobedience, serving as an object lesson for anyone who might think of rebelling or defying authority. It was a sound that struck terror into the hearts, the swish of a whip, the deafening thud, and then the piercing screams of pain coming from the victim that echoed through the streets or the camp, reminding everyone of the consequences of insubordination. Life in Roman society, especially for slaves and the lower classes, meant the constant threat of being subjected to this ruthless tool, which could not only cripple the body, but also break the spirit, turning a person into a submissive being. The flagrum was an invisible but pervasive aspect of Roman everyday life, a reminder that order in the empire was maintained not only by laws and legions, but also by an iron hand holding a whip that knew no mercy and was one of the most brutal symbols of Roman power, capable of subjugating any will through pain and fear, ensuring unquestioning obedience. We've just taken a dive into the Roman soldier's arsenal, taking a look at 10 brutal weapons that made Rome a great military power. From the famous gladius, who forged empires in close combat, to the treacherous caltrops that spread panic under the enemy's feet, and the devastating siege engines that can crush any walls. We also touched on the role of the flagrum, which, while not a combat weapon, was the epitome of brutality and control. The Roman military machine was an amazing combination of innovation, pragmatism, and ruthless efficiency. Each weapon in their arsenal was designed not just to kill, but to achieve specific tactical goals, destroying the system, demoralizing the enemy, breaking through the defense. It was through such thoughtfulness and brutal efficiency that the Roman legions were able to conquer most of the known world. This story is not just a list of weapons, but a look at how the Romans used technology and tactics to achieve their ambitions. It shows us at what cost Pax Romana was won and maintained. If you like this fascinating and informative story, and you want to learn even more about the hidden, little-known secrets of military history and great civilizations, be sure to subscribe to our channel and put a like. We will be happy to share with you new, even more amazing and shocking facts from the past that will make you reconsider your ideas about long-past eras. What other aspects of the Roman war machine or other ancient civilizations would you like us to reveal to you? Tell us about it in the comments. Your opinion is very important for us, and we are always happy to have a new idea for research.